Hello everyone, we're very pleased to be introducing RAD Studio 12.2 to you. This is Ian Barker, the Embarcadero Developer Advocate. I'm just going to summarise a few of the new features here. There's a modernised C++ compiler and toolchains, Delphi 64-bit compilers and tools, smart CodeInsight, focus mode and scrollbar annotations, and my favourite feature, WebStencils. For quality, we've got improved mobile development, Visual Assist for C++ builder enhancements, more of them, and also quality. Once again, we've doubled down on quality with this release. Anyway, I'll hand you over to the product managers now so they can go through the details and explain all the new features and functionality.
Hi folks, David here, and I'd ask the Delphi people to wait for a moment because we have some great C++ news. Now, back in 12.1 we shipped the first version of the new Windows 64-bit modern toolchain. Well, now in 12.2 it's fully feature complete, matching the previous Win64 toolchain, and we have even more great news. When we shipped it in 12.1 it was missing one main feature, dynamic packages. Now it supported static packages, so you could build your VCL or FireMonkey apps fine, but you'd end up with a single large exe. In 12.2, dynamic packages are back in two ways. First, you can link to dynamic packages, i.e. just use BPL files just as you'd expect. But second, you can also create packages in C++. So not only can you use packages from Delphi, but you can write them in C++ as well. If you prefer using packages, especially because of the architectural benefits, splitting parts of code, this is great for you. We know lots of people have been very excited by the new toolchain, but have been waiting to use it in full until we have package support, and now we do. So this means the new toolchain support for packages is complete, it fully matches the past. It's a brand new implementation, and we've been aware of how tricky packages can be in C++ when writing it. And related to that, we have several new docwiki pages that talk about how packages work in C++, including guidelines for what to do, how to understand the effect of something like declspec package, and more. Alright, second up is CMake support. Now, we first introduced CMake a few years ago and our support got out of date. We've brought it back for the new toolchain, and we plan to ship a copy of CMake directly and get it shortly after we release. CMake and Ninja are the industry standard C++ build tools, and these should allow you to build many third-party C++ libraries far more easily. Plus, of course, VCL and FireMonkey ones if you want to use them, such as for a CI setup. Now normally we'd say Ninja is also a benefit for fast compiling, which it is, but we have more news on that. Probably the biggest pain point in C++ is compile time. It's a very powerful language, but it can be slow to build. There's a famous XKCD comic about compile speeds that some of you may have seen before, which makes a joke of it. While you're compiling, you might not have much to do, thus sword fights on office chairs. But it's not really a joke because it can be a productivity issue. It's useful to have a fast compile debug cycle so you don't lose your focus or thoughts while trying to solve problems. Or fast builds may allow you to have a better CI setup. We've had a few solutions to this. TimeCompile, which is a great tool and works with BCC64X, CMake and Ninja, as we just spoke about, which is really better or intended for using with third-party libraries because it's what they come with, and in the past, batch compilation with the --jobs parameter. This one sends all the C++ files to the compiler in one go, i.e. batches, and used multiple processes at once, which was jobs. In 12.2 we've brought that back, but it's a completely new implementation. The new batch compilation with jobs is faster than the old version, and it's on by default. This means that just by installing 12.2, next time you compile, you'll get an immediate speed up. No configuration, no settings, no changes, just install 12.2 and it's faster. And it will roughly scale with the number of cores and amount of RAM your machine has. But how much faster? We ran some benchmarks on some synthetic code where we created 5,000 files containing 360,000 lines of code. And we measured compiling this against the classic compiler, Visual C++ with Ninja and with its own version of multiprocessing, our toolchain with Ninja, and the new default. First, classic is very fast, That's because it does far less, the compiler is far simpler, and the STL available for it is far simpler. And while we strongly encourage you to move away from Classic, we know people still use it because of its compile speed, so it's important to have on this kind of chart. Let's look at Visual C++ used with Ninja, Ninja being the industry standard parallel compilation tool. It takes a bit under 30 seconds. Then let's look at Visual C++ with the /mp flag. This is Microsoft's own version of our -- jobs, and shows what may be the best case scenario for Visual C++. It's a lot faster than with Ninja. Now let's look at our new compiler, BCC64X. First, let's look with Ninja. It's faster than Microsoft Visual C++, which is unexpected. We don't currently know why that is, and maybe it's just this codebase. But it's already looking pretty good. Finally, you might detect a trend on the times here where smaller is better, and you can see a direction we're going. So let's look at what we get with the new compiler using our new batch compilation and jobs. Wow! Now this speeds up based on how much it can parallelize, which means you need CPU cores and memory. We tested on a beefy machine, and you can see its hardware on the slide, over a dozen cores and 64 gigs of RAM. But we think it's fair to say that you should get performance improvements over the default compilation by upgrading to 12.2, and we certainly recommend installing it and trying it out. Now, we are still benchmarking. That was synthetic generated code, and we found while I was writing this presentation that code using the STL was slower. And that may be to do with libc++ having many individual files and what are called transitive includes, which is where you include something that includes something that includes something. Or other indications are that it depends on the C++ version you target, especially when comparing against different toolchains. So at this stage, we're still benchmarking and testing, and it is likely that you will not get results completely matching the first benchmark we did with your genuine real-world code. Now that particular benchmark showed that we are faster than other modern toolchains, but other benchmarks are different and we're analyzing that. What we can say is that in some measurements, as you saw, we are faster than the other comparable toolchains we've tested against. What matters is really the performance improvement for your projects. And just because we have this feature on by default, you should see compile times improve by default just by installing and using 12.2. Plus, this effect will be more visible the more files you have, i.e. the larger your project, the more this will be visible, matched with having more cores and RAM. So, stay tuned for a blog on this. Either way, you can tell we're focusing on delivering a really high quality toolchain for you. We've finished the toolchain with dynamic packages. We will have CMake and get it soon, and we have an inbuilt, on by default parallel compile where we expect to see excellent speedups as you scale cores and memory. 12.2 is a really exciting release for C++.
Thanks, David. Now moving to the Delphi compilers, there is one great feature that's available in 12.2. We are shipping the 64-bit version of the Delphi compiler for Win32 and Win64. 64-bit version doesn't mean targeting or building 64-bit application, but it's the compiler itself that is a 64-bit executable, and therefore the compiler is now able to handle extremely large application because it has a huge memory address space compared to the 3 GB that were available on the older 32-bit binaries. We have enabled this feature only for the command line compilers because the IDE cannot invoke a compiler directly, but the compilers are enabled from the IDE when you're using the external MS build. In that case, there is a new feature. You can determine which is your preferred tool architecture and can be 32 or 64-bit. So the goal here is to allow building a very large application with tens of millions of lines of source code as a single executable. And that's also the reason we have made this feature available only in Enterprise and Architect in 12.2. The same option is available also for the Delphi LSP. Because Delphi LSP is a separate executable, it can be activated in the IDE in a version that is built as a 64-bit binary. So both the command line compilers available through MS Build and the Delphi LSP engine are available as 64-bit application. The new C++ compiler, which is also a separate executable, is and has been 64-bit since the release. So now let's move from the compiler to the IDE. And there is one big feature that we're introducing in 12.2. We've called it Smart CodeInsight. And it's the ability to use AI LLMs within the RAD Studio IDE. Rather than teaming with one individual vendor and one individual company and provide you one specific option, what we've decided to do is to build an open architecture for plugins that are tied to artificial intelligence. The architecture is based on an Open Tools API, and in fact, you can create your own plugins for this architecture. Of course, having only the architecture won't be terribly useful. We are also shipping ready-to-use support for 3 online solutions: the OpenAI API, the Gemini API by Google, and the Claude API by Anthropic. We're also providing one offline solution, offline meaning a solution you can install locally on your machine or a machine in your network, and that solution is on Llama. We are also providing a ready-to-use Docker image that you can install on a Linux machine or you can install on the Windows subsystem for Linux. What's important to underline is that everything is optional and it's disabled by default. You can disable it. You can enable each of the individual engines that you want to use, and you have a license to use. Of course, before you use one of these APIs, you need to create an account on the system and pay for the usage to the vendor. And what you need to do in the configuration page is add some general parameters plus the individual API keys that are provided you once you have an active account. Again, you can choose which providers are active. You can choose the default provider for the operations done in the editor. You can choose the same or a different provider for the chat window available in the IDE. You can decide to disable everything and nothing will happen. You can decide to use only an offline solution that provides you the maximum privacy because there's zero information sent to anyone else on the internet. So that was our approach, and that is the goal of this solution. You decide if and how to use AI, and you decide which of the vendors you want to work with and you trust. That's different from some other IDEs that tend to offer one preferred solution, at times made by the same vendor. How does it work in practice? There is a new chat window where you can ask like general purpose questions, ask to generate code for you, ask for anything specific. It's in the IDE, so you can easily copy and paste from that result window into your editor. There is also another option directly tied to the IDE itself, which is the ability to select code in the editor. Could be a function, could be a class, could be an entire unit, and invoke some ready-to-use operations on that code, like find bugs, explain code, add comments, complete the code, optimize, add unit tests, or some conversion function. These are available straight away in the IDE. And this is an example. I've written some clumsy code, clearly wrong code. I hope all of you recognize this as not being a good idea to allocate some memory and just walk away. And not only this was highlighted, I think in this case by ChatGPT, but also there was suggestion to rewrite that code in a different way with a proper try finally block. As I mentioned, that screenshot was captured using ChatGPT. Now let's switch to a different engine and see what happens if I select the same function and I go to the Smart CodeInsight options and ask to find bugs in the code. The results are similar, not too surprisingly, although the code is slightly different. Now let me try another option, which is explain code. I found that quite nice. That would be probably good for a beginner to, okay, what is this code? What is this button? What is this button one click? What's happening here? And so it's telling me the type starts a type declaration. Tform is a class named Tform, which inherits from Tform. And button is a public field. likely represent a button control on the 4. Yes, that is true. And button click is a method that takes a parameter and is likely an event handler for the buttons click event, which is actually correct.
Hello again. In 12.1 we introduced split editor views, which have quality work this release by the way, which was a reworking of how the editor can work and be configured within an IDE window, allowing multiple editors. This technology has allowed us to add another new IDE editor feature, and that's focus mode. Focus mode is similar to what's known as Zen mode in other IDEs, but we gave it a different name to avoid any religious terminology, and because it is all about focus. The idea is just your code editor. That's it, only code. And we remove most of the IDE UI and even remove other UI, the idea being that it is an IDE mode to use for distraction-free, focused coding. To open focus mode for the current editor, press Ctrl-Alt-Z or use the tab menu. You can see on screen in the background what it looks like in light mode by default. It is full screen with a centered editor. And that's it. You can even, and see the screenshot at the front, reduce editor UI by turning off things like the navigation toolbar or showing the blue dots. Again, the idea is to have a focus on code and remove as much of everything else as is possible and useful to still allow it to be just you and your code. Here's a screenshot in dark mode, which is my favorite way of using it. And note we support split editors in focus mode too, and you can use Ctrl F12 or one of the toolbar buttons at the top to open units. So that's focus mode. Remove distracting UI and have just you and your code. We hope you'll find it useful for those long or complex coding sessions. We have some other really nice additions too. One is scrollbar annotations. You can display bookmarks, changes, highlighted tokens, and compiler errors or warnings on the scrollbar. Of course, it comes with Tools API support and you can draw there too. This is really useful to allow you to see on the scrollbar where something you're interested in is, and jump there quickly. Inline assembly inside Delphi code now supports syntax highlighting. Plus, the code completion dropdown can be drawn using the editor colors, which you may prefer if you use the editor with a very different color scheme to the IDE's surrounding color scheme. Finally, we have a lot of quality work, and that's especially around the split views, plus the way the IDE toolbars behave in high DPI.
Thank you, David. Hello everyone, Nuno here from the PM team. I'm pretty excited to announce that for Visual Assists we have integrated the 2 new refactorings, 3 new features, being them introduce variable, create from usage, and extract methods. Plus, we have done some significant quality and stability improvements around the code navigation and code completion. All of this that you'll be able to experience in RAD Studio 12.2. And to showcase these 3 new refactorings, let's jump into RAD Studio itself and have a demonstration live on how those work. So for this demo, I will be showcasing a pretty simple application. That's what it does is you input your gross salary and you select your country and it calculates your net amount that you should receive. Just a disclaimer for this demo, every country applies the same flat rate as taxes for simplicity. And as a lot of you know, every time that we are doing codes, not always we do the cleanest of codes, especially when we are doing things for the first time and we are in that flow where we are thinking on what we want to do. And this application was no different. So, for example, here in the calculate net salary event, that is what is run when I click in the calculate salary button. What we are doing here in the first section is to see if any of the boxes, of the edit boxes or the combo box is empty, and this is a validation. So when I look into this method, this is not the most fundamental part of the methods, but is what takes more space and mental space when I look into it. So a good thing for us to do is to extract it to a method for better clarity and readability of these methods. And with VA now, we can do this very simple. What we need to do is just to select the entire part that we want to extract. We right click on it, we go to the refactor menu, and we click extract methods. In here, Visual Studio presents us with this pop-up that has a few options. First one is to choose the method name, and in this case I will choose run validations. And then we have a few other options. First is I can choose to not select either of the boxes, and if I click OK, what VA will do is extract this method directly into the header file, the declaration and the source code implementation, but is not what we want in this case. The section option is extract as a free function, and if I select this option, what VA will do is create a function that is not tied to any scope. And the last one, extract to source, is it will extract the function, making the declaration in the header file, and then on the source file the implementation. That is exactly what I want. So let's go and see what happens. I clicked OK, and as you saw, VA created the method for me here in the source file, and on the original methods it changed the lines by calling the function itself. And now if we look into the header file, we will see that it also created the declaration in the header file, just as we expected. And if we run our code, everything will work as expected. The second part that we can showcase is, for example, in this showcase, in this show message, we notice that we have this line here. This line is calculating the net salary. However, just for reading it is very difficult to understand, and it will be easier if we have a named variable for it. So let's go ahead and do it. Refactor, introduce variable, and I'll call it net salary. And now VA created the variable for me in the innermost scope. That is exactly what I wanted. And once again, if you look at the methods, now it's much easier to read. So it will run some validations, it will then calculate the net salary, and then it will show the net salary as a pop-up message. And if we run the code, we will see that everything works as expected. And now the last but not least, we will look into create from usage. So let's say that every country now decided to apply a flat rate of taxes, and we want to add it to our calculator. We can go here, we add a new flat rate, but as you might have noticed, this flat rate is not declared anywhere, so if we try to compile, it will fail. However, VA is very clever and can do something for you. So you can right click on an undefined symbol, you go refactor, create from usage, and you can choose to create a new, in this case, variable for an undefined symbol. And for this case, what I will want is to create a global variable. I will make it a const and click OK. And what happened was VA indeed created a variable for me that I will now define to, let's say, more 10%, and instead of int, I actually want it to double. And if we press run, everything works as expected. So let's say 100K, country United States, calculate net salary, and here you go. This is it for VA for 12.2. Next, over to Marco.
Thanks, Nuno. Marco again here. Now that we've looked into the compilers and IDE, let's start focusing into some of the library extensions we have in RAD Studio 12.2. The most important one is certainly the new WebStencils template library that we are introducing in this release. It's a server-side, script-based integration engine. The idea is you process HTML files, either in WebBroker or RAD server, and you merge into a template, into a skeleton, data that is available within the application itself. You can use it to build any modern website using any JavaScript library, any type of cascaded style sheet, and basically any web technology. The idea is that you extract data in a RAD Studio server-side application, process and merge it with HTML. There are many template libraries out there. It's not a new technology, but it's the first time that a library like this is available directly in RAD Studio. One thing that we want to highlight is that this can be really a great foundation for building HTMX applications. It's a new library that is growing and very interesting. HTMX pages benefit from server-side code generation. They're really declarative in their approach compared to JavaScript-based libraries where you have JavaScript code that is more procedural than declarative. What you can see here is an example of a very nice HTMX application built with WebStencils. I'll get to in a minute. What is a template library? It's a scripting engine that uses a specific syntax. It uses the add symbol to indicate special processing elements, blocks, variables, or keywords. And then it uses angle brackets to define a block of code. It also supports simple expressions. Let me just show you a very, very simple demo. In the code, you can have an object, in this case, this simple object with a name and a value, and you give it a name, object2, and make this object available to the processor. In the HTML, you can have two different things. One is you can access to information like that add object2.name or add object2.value, or you can invoke access properties and operations within a conditional statement, that value below 10. This is conditional. The concept here is that HTML snippet that you're seeing at the bottom will be visible if the value within that object is less than 10. Otherwise, that entire if block will be omitted and you'll only have the header without any HTML content. So not only you can replace values, but you can also have a logic that enables or disables sections of your HTML depending on actual data and logic within your Delphi or C++ builder application. How do you access the data? It can be RTTI based, as I was showing earlier, so object.property. There is an onValue event handler, which allows you for a lot of flexibility. So when you say add object.value, you have an onValue event handler that provides you as parameters the string object, the string value, and up to you to do any processing you like. The idea, you can register objects, you can register lists of objects, you can register entire data sets. And when you have a data set registered, you can navigate through the records using for each loop, like in this other small code snippet. In this case, I have a for each dataset, where dataset is an object registered with the name dataset. And then I access to some of the fields like company, country, city, state, and so forth. You can also define module variables that are available for all scripts in a web module. Let me explain a little better the previous example. This is a WebBroker application. It has an action. The action allows you to associate a path /list to some code that needs to be executed. The code to be executed is that action. So what we're doing here, we're opening a data set. We are registering that data set with the name dataset, and then we are processing the file associated with this WebStencil processor component. And in the file, there is the code that was already on the previous page. For each dataset, read some of the fields. This is what you do in a simple scenario. In more complex scenarios, both WebBroker and RAD Server offer a way to do a direct mapping. So associate a number of different URLs with a number of different files according to high-level roles and logic. Before I go to the next slide and provide you a couple of more details, let's actually show quickly a demo in action. This is the demo I was actually showing earlier. There are a number of actions, each mapped to a different URL. There are a number of WebStencil processor components, for example, company list, which is associated with this company list HTML. There is the action event handler for company list, which is the code I was showing earlier. And then there is the HTML, which provides the skeleton of the page. Now, this is not a full complete page. The reason is that one of the features of HTML templates is that they allow you to separate the content of the page with the structure of the page. In this case, the structure is in the layout called base template, which is here. This is a standard bootstrap-based page with some styles and other information that's not terribly important to look at now, a menu and so forth. And then in one location of the template says render body. So that means, oh, now let's add the actual specific page content here. You can have multiple templates and each page has a reference to one of the templates. The net result is an application that lets you open in the browser and get a list of companies. And then I'm not going to show you the code for each company to access to specific information. And also that if test we were looking at earlier. Now let me cover a couple of more things quickly. We can really go in depth into all of the features of WebStencils in this launch webinar. There is a query keyword to access any of the HTTP parameters. There is ability to add comments. There are if statement, including if not and if else options. There are two different syntax for each object, or the ability to define a local variable name for the objects in the list. This allows you to create nested for each loops. There is the ability to import a code snippet within any existing template and file, and the ability to scaffolding, which is something I'm going to omit for now. In terms of template, as I was showing earlier, you can indicate in a file, which is the layout, which is the template. Within the template, you can indicate where to place the actual content. There is the ability to inject extra headers in the template, and of course, the ability to indicate where those extra headers need to be rendered. Headers regularly go within the header section of your HTML. Last thing I want to mention, there are two main components. There is a WebStencils processor, allows you to process an individual file, as I was showing earlier. But there's also an engine component that allows you to define a web dispatch mapping with WebBroker or RAD server, allows you to define the default directory for all of the files and define mapping logic from incoming URLs into the actual files to be used for processing. With this, let me show you a final, nicer demo of WebStencils. This demo is built as a console app, and this demo would work both on Windows and Linux. So what I need to do is actually start the server, and now I can hook a browser. Once you connect to this demo, you can see a number of different use case scenarios. It's a very extensive demo. What I'm only going to focus is the examples. This is an example of a very large page with 1,000 records from randomly generated customers. And you can see it's very fast. It's also very fast to generate the page, merging the 1,000 records into the HTML. The other demo, this demo shows a list of tasks where you can create a new task and add it to the list. You can delete. Fairly complete, nice looking web application built completely using HMX and using WebStencils on the server. Now there's another feature I want to mention in terms of library improvements, and that's for mobile development for Delphi. For the Apple platform, we have updated the linker to the most recent version Apple provides. And the big advantage there is that we can now link static libraries on iOS for including, for example, the Firebase iOS SDK. On Android, we've added a number of features to the deployment process, including the ability to compress DAX files and compress native libraries. These are all options in the RAD Studio IDE now. Also, you can customize the target SDK version rather than having a single value hard-coded, and you can change directly in the manifest file. Now, it can be configured in the IDE. Also, the ability to import Android libraries or .aar files, which allows you, for example, to import the Facebook SDK for Android or the Firebase Analytics by Google. And with that, let's focus on some quality areas in RAD Studio 12.2.
Among the other quality improvements that we put into 12.2, which we'll talk about in a moment, we've focused on debugger quality. There are several improvements in the various RAD Studio debuggers, and the Delphi debugger now handles repeated inline variables with the same name, which was a problem before. We've also improved the debugger error handling and the remote debugger's communication timeouts. We're focusing on quality, and these are the kind of quality of life improvements, but just general quality improvements we put into 12.2.
For Delphi LSP quality, before we jump into what we have done for 12.2, I would like to share that the team is very committed in bringing code completion, code navigation, and code formatting to the highest standard possible. We are putting our focus mainly into those three areas for LSP. This version for 12.2, we had a lot in our hands with the 64-bit version of LSP, but we didn't want to leave any of these areas untouched. So we have made a few improvements where, for example, now symbol ints will work in the class interface, including fields. Hovering over local constants and variables will now resolve their definitions. And the NGL will now be able to also resolve forward type declarations. Probably in most cases, but at the moment not in all cases. The team is very happy also to share that we have done some internal tools that will help us identify problems with the LSP and to help identify regressions before we put them live. So we are very focused on trying to bring LSP to the highest standards possible, and I hope that everyone will be able to enjoy what we'll do and what we have done so far. Over to Marco now.
Thanks, Nuno. Let me finish by going over a few additional quality areas in RAD Studio 12.2. For the Delphi RTL, besides addressing some quality tickets, we've added 3 small new features. There is a new parallel array class that allows you to do parallel operations like sorting on an array. This can make sorting 2 or 3 times faster. There's a new t-order dictionary, and there is support for the ragnon type in the registry. That's a key with no type. That's a feature of the Windows API that is now surfaced in the t-registry class. For VCL, the main focus was on quality work around frame scaling, around the new forms tab bar component introduced in 12.0, styling issues, and high DPI issues. The work was quite extensive, and we're very happy of the outcome. Notice that some of these improvements also positively affect the IDE, which is using the VCL with styling and high DPI. For FireMonkey, we did the work on Android deployment, as mentioned earlier. Also, a lot of quality work in many areas. Main focus still T-edit and memo controls on mobile. We have refactored them for desktop and now also for mobile across the various 12x releases. So lots of work happening on FireMonkey to improve the quality and stability of the library across all supported platforms. Talking about RAD Server, there is one significant improvement, which is the WebStencils integration. RAD Server was mainly focused on web service development. Now you can do web development with RAD Server. We have reworked the push notification, supporting Firebase, for both iOS and Android. This requires support for HTTP2 that was missing. Notice that to enable it on Windows, you need to use libcurl and not the native Windows library. We've also worked a lot in improving the Swagger documentation, the API documentation that's automatically generated by RAD server, in terms of providing customization of some of the metadata, filtering of the APIs you want to document, support for YAML in addition to JSON, and also enable the use of multi-line string literals in some of the attributes. With that, I want to highlight the fact that quality overall took a lot of focus and attention, despite this webinar was focused primarily on the new features added. We addressed approximately 350 customer reported issues across the various subsystems. We've implemented almost 30 feature requests. These are tickets that have been reported on the old or the new quality portal for customers. And in terms of focus areas, the largest number of tickets was addressed in the IDE, VCL and FireMonkey. We also addressed a number in the C++ and Delphi compilers and in the Delphi runtime library.